Welcome everybody. I don't know if you are movie fans, but Gordon Gekko in the great 80s flick Wall Street said, the most valuable commodity I know of is information. All companies, no matter how big or small, have a vast amount of information. Information can be in many forms. It can be locked away in your ERP data, your CRM data, or data from other external systems. But how do you manage that data? You may be using Excel, Sage Intelligence, SQL, or any other number of business intelligence tools on the market. But whatever tool you use, you're trying to analyze and transform that data so it's usable quickly and efficiently to give you answers. If I use an example like how many items did I sell in September by state, okay, you can build a report to tell you that. Maybe it's static. You maybe use Crystal Reports. You may have exported all the data to Excel. Whatever way, it takes a bit of time. But then next month, you might want to know how many of a particular item you sold in October. You might want to know that by state or by item category. You might even want to see it in a graph just to make it easier to look at. Okay, I can go ahead, create a new static report, or I can change the Excel spreadsheet. Any way you do it, it's going to take time and delay the answers that you need to make decisions. So what if you had a single product? That product has a dashboard, and on that dashboard, you can have a visualization, which might be a graph or a chart. You can have 3, 4, or even 5 or more different pieces of information that's all related. You can have slices at the top to change what data the dashboard gives you. Then if you want to see the underlying data, you can click on the dashboard and drill down to the data. We can all get there with extracts, but how fast you get it and the time it takes the data to be actionable. Most reporting occurs retrospectively. If anything, COVID's taught us that we need to be able to be agile and pivot fast. 2 weeks to report on past sales is too long. You need it in the touch of a button. Is it magic? No, it's not. Is it impossible? No, it's not. What you're looking for is a tool that allows you to get the answers. It has to be simple to use, and you don't have to be a data scientist to understand it. All of this can be achieved with one piece of software, and that product is Zap. And today I have with me from Zap, Christopher Reeves, the CTO, and Trevor Legg, Head of Sales. So Christopher is going to discuss with us ready-made analytics and dashboards can help boost your business intelligence. So Christopher, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Joe. So the questions might be very simple as in the mail out, but too often the source of your data is not. And so the challenge to creating your analytics is in understanding large and complex sources such as Sage X3 and Sage 300. And we're here to discuss that challenge and how to improve your organizational reporting and data management. So a quick note on my background, I've been working in data management for 15 years. And given my role, I obviously have a very technical history, but this won't be a technical discussion. At the very least, because we only have 10 minutes before it's Trevor's show. So I am happy to take any questions, and maybe Joe, if they get too technical, we might just take them offline. I'll introduce a few basic concepts in passing, but my goal is to just present what you need to keep in mind when choosing a reporting or data management platform. And I'm going to assume that you've joined us here today because you're already hitting up against the limitations of your ERP's reporting. You know that there are actionable insights to be gained from your data, and you just need the analytics to support these insights. So we immediately hit up against the build versus buy decision. And there are very good reasons that your company might choose to build out its own suite of analytics, in particular, if their ERP is heavily customized, but the challenges are very real. So let's just quickly run through those. Start with, there are in excess of 1,000 tables on the back end of both X3 and Sage 300. And it takes in the order of 1,000 hours to develop a meaningful suite of analytics against those tables. much of that time is actually spent in validating your results. And this is essential because what's worse than no data, and that's the wrong data, because now you're making the wrong decision, but with confidence. The skills are hard to find. As I said, I've been in this field for many years, and I wouldn't attempt to build a Sage X3, say, model, because it requires data expertise and a very specific knowledge of the ERP's back-end database, not even the ERP in general. And the costs don't stop there. There are lifecycle considerations. Every ERP upgrade entails managing the lifecycle of your analytics. And finally, for all of that effort, you're at best 3 months away from your analytics and more likely 6 months away from trustable analytics. So you can imagine my recommendation is, at least for most of you here today, you should be considering a pre-built suite of analytics. And that's what we're here to discuss. But the reality is that no pre-built suite can ever provide everything you want. It may provide everything you need, at least initially, but every business is unique. So what you need is a solution with flexibility. And so there are 3 layers of flexibility that I'd like to talk to today. And the first being the flexibility to use the best analytic tool. Now I'm baiting a bit there because I'm not going to tell you what the best analytic tool is, because it's what's best for your business, and that's your call to make. You may be comfortable taking on a new reporting tool, or you may have existing skill sets that justify sticking with what you have, be it Power BI or Tableau. But keep in mind that your tool requirements may evolve over time. So the flexibility we're talking about here avoids vendor lock-in. And the ideal scenario is then a solution that provides your pre-built analytics across a set of industry-leading analytic tools to provide that choice. But whatever your tool, be sure to democratize your data. So that's a relatively recent phrase you've heard, no doubt. But the point being, don't restrict your data to just 1 or 2 users. Get it in front of as many people as possible. There's a real magic to having a highly visible chart, especially one with a line going in the wrong direction. And as an anecdote, we actually have our own 15-inch dashboard in our kitchen for just this purpose, not at all because the 15-inch dashboard doubles as a sports screen. So once you've got your analytics in your tool of choice, you need the flexibility to customize those analytics. And this is my next point on the layers of flexibility. So sensibly, if you need a small layout tweak, whichever tool you chose, it's going to be easy. But the challenges present when you want to bring in, say, a new column. Now that's where it gets different. We talked to the complexity of our sources of data, and you don't want to have to walk into that forest every time you need to make a small change. So what you need is a data model. And this is the first important concept that I'll introduce. So a data model is just a model to capture the business entities relevant for your analytics. For example, customers, products, and orders. And a data model allows you to ignore all the complexity behind the scenes. A well-designed data model captures the tables, columns, relationships that are relevant to your business in your business language and using friendly names. And ultimately, with the right data model, analytics become an exercise in drag and drop. So what we've come to is you need pre-built analytics and a pre-built data model. So just quickly, ideally your data model should be a point and click deployment. Again, speak your language and cover the modules relevant to your business, embed relevant calculations to your business, transparently combine multiple companies where required, and for those familiar, that can often be quite a challenge. And finally, ideally provide flexible fiscal calendar options. So now with the right data model, you're in the position to not just customize your analytics, but you can also build your own. And I'll say one quick thing about building your own analytics, because with the right data model, the real challenge is you can too easily find yourself building out a whole suite of analytics, and then you're in the position where you have a sprawling set as opposed to a single source of truth. And that single source of truth is where you want to be. So my recommendation is, if you're starting out with a pre-built suite of analytics, be very familiar with everything that is already provided out of the box. And then where you establish a gap, you want to consider what action that new analytic would drive. And if you can't identify a meaningful action that you would drive from that new analytic and a valuable action, then save your time. So we've talked to two layers of flexibility, and you want the flexibility to use the appropriate tool and customize your analytics. But what if you want to bring in a single column in your ERP that wasn't otherwise in the model? Or more ambitiously, say, what if you want to combine in some CRM data from a separate system? And in both of these cases, you now need the flexibility to customize the data model itself. So I'll very quickly review some of the things that you might look for in such a solution. And to start with, it almost goes without saying that you want it to be easy. Anyone should be able to rename, add, and remove columns in the data model. That's the basics. You also want the ability to connect and easily combine data from multiple sources in a business user-friendly interface. And now these next 3 points really depend on the maturity of the data maturity of your organization, but you may look for some of the following. The ability to capture historical changes in your data. This is a whole subject unto itself, so I won't go deep, and we may cover it in a future webinar, but the point is, without a tool that makes it so easy to track these changes, you're just not going to know what you don't know, if you forgive the Rumsfeld reference. And you may look for a tool with a comprehensive solution to data governance, in particular one that has very flexible data security capabilities. And lastly, depending on your requirements, you may look for the ability to add a semantic layer to your model. So don't be concerned about that word yet. If you're familiar with cubes or in-memory models, they're just semantic layers. And a semantic layer provides the semantics or meaning to your information. And this meaning usually takes the form of hierarchies for drill down, or summarization. For example, you summarize a column by average or total. And so defining these things in your semantic or meaning layer prevents you from having to redefine that meaning in each and every dashboard, which somewhat takes you down the Excel spreadsheet hell scenario. So pulling it all together in a slightly different order, to get the best out of your data, you want pre-built analytics and a pre-built model. You want the flexibility to use whichever tool is best for your company. And finally, you want the flexibility to customize the data model to your unique business should you require it. But keep in mind, you might very well need model changes down the track. So that's my piece, and I believe at this point we plan to open it up to a few more questions. Jo, Georgia?
Yes, thank you, Chris. I've got a couple questions here for you. Someone says, sounds easy, but how hard is it to build a report from scratch?
Yes, excellent. So I believe Trevor will actually cover off just that. And a second point to that would be that a product is really bolstered by its training and documentation, and we have and continue to invest massively on that particular side of things because we see that's what makes the difference in ease of use.
Okay, wonderful. And question 2, our system has some developments. How hard is it to add a new field to the data model?
Excellent. So that again is going to be a point and click, and that this is really preempting what Trevor's going to cover, which is fantastic, but I'll leave that one to Trevor as well.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Christopher. We will now hand it over to Trevor.
Alrighty, thank you. So, as Chris said, we are looking at the pre-built applications and having a look at what you get when you do go down the path of looking at pre-built solutions. So what we'll take you through today, and in the interest of time, we don't have a lot of time, so it'll be a bit quick, but we'll be open to questions afterwards and obviously available for one-on-one sessions at another date. But what we'll do is give you the highlights of a pre-built solution and what that might look like, and discuss some of the questions that have been raised so far. So what we're looking at here is we have a pre-built solution for both Sage X3 and Sage 300. And by pre-built solution, what we mean is we have mapped those underlying databases for those applications, and we have built a data model to support the analytics from those systems. We've also then extended that based on our 20-year history of analytics projects, where we've included up to, I think, around 200 in each of those solutions, 200 pre-built first-class KPIs, so measures and KPIs that are typical for different roles around finance, inventory, procurement, sales, etc. And we've built all of those out for you, so you don't have to find out where that data lives and how to combine it to come up with things like net sales or gross margin or cost of goods sold or some of the working ratios. We've done all of the hard work for you. And once this is ready to go, it's just a matter of customizing those formulas and calculations to suit the way your business determines those metrics. So if we look at the dashboard here, you'll see this is an example, and it is a demonstration environment to show the breadth of the data that we are capturing from the Sage systems. It's also showing, for example, some of the interactions you can have where you might have multi-company. You can, start to break these down by different companies and having a look at a different slice of the data for that company, but still using the same report. So making it very easy to just slice and dice, as I'm sure you've all heard. You could do that by date, and you can add and customize whichever slices you wish to have on this dashboard to slice that data by. And we also have the interactions. Have a look at the data that's sitting underneath there, and we can do things such as drill in, have a look at what might be sitting underneath the month of December and look at it by day. We can drill back up again. And as people are also used to, you might want to, because we bring through all of the transactions. So you might want to actually drill through, for example, into your AR and have a look at the individual records that sit underneath that graph and have a look at what's there and do some exception reporting that way as well. We might also, as a CFO, be interested in, rather having to scrabble around and change applications, we might just want to drill across and using a click get into something like the income statements. And we've added on this dashboard some supporting information for the P&L. You'll see that all of these are also interactive. So I might want to have a look at my operating expenses and see what makes up that number. And again, I can drill through into the transactions behind that number. And then, as finance people love to do, you may even wish to send that out to Excel as a formatted report or as a CSV, or even print these as a PDF. And you're free to do that if you choose. The point being, though, is all of the heavy lifting has been done to get this data from your Sage systems and onto these dashboards for you using the process that Chris has described to this point. And we have these across all of the modules that you might find. In this case, it's for X3, and we're covering off, and it's the same for Sage. For 300, we're also covering off these modules. So we have similar role-based dashboards within each of these modules. So how does it all work? So to tie into, I think, Chris's conversation around the complexities that lie behind this thing, and there are well over 1,000 tables in X3, for example. If I have a look at our model, what comes out of the box, if you will, It's quite simple to look at. We have our data sources that we map in. We have pipelines, which are essentially pipelines of data that we extract data from your source system. We build relationships between the data. We set up refresh schedules, how often that the data will be refreshed. We allow you to run some database scripts if you need to, set some global parameters, set up your security, choose which modules you'd like to work with from your 300 or X3 instance. And then, as you'll see, is we've built out over 200 calculations or KPIs for X3 for you that are all built for you. They've all been mapped across all of those modules. And so if you'll see, it's just a calculation where we're taking the number of orders that are older than 14 days and figuring out which ones of them are late over 14 days. And if your company chooses to calculate that in a different way, it's very, very easy to change and edit this formula using the expression builder and dragging in the relevant pieces of information you wish to use to calculate that. Very easy to customize, much easier than sitting down and figuring out where all of those are stored in your Sage environment. So to answer one of the questions, as I'll show you, if we look at what's actually in our ERP Sage X3 model, one of the questions was, you've made some customizations possibly in your environment. And that's fine. It is an out-of-the-box solution, and we've mapped what would traditionally be there in a typical environment. But what you can then do once you, let me neaten this up, once you have installed and are ready to go, what you can do is then press the refresh table and refresh schema button, and that will go ahead and interrogate your environment and bring in all of those new added custom additional tables that you might have and bring these into the environment, from which point it's a simple matter of mapping that into the model using the point and click environment I'll show you shortly. So you'll see here, as those, all those heavy lifting of those 1,000 tables, they've all been done. It's all been done. We've mapped all of those tables for you. And as Chris said, bringing in the business language descriptions and the semantics behind all of those tables. So, as developers, you don't need to memorize that the data warehouse table is called whatever that is. You just need to worry about what its actual name is, because we are able to bring that across for you as well. And likewise with the columns. So that's looking at the model. We've done all of that work and make it very easy for you to bring that in. Now, as I said, I think there was a question as well around adding columns. So if we look at pipelines, for example, these are the actual extractions, the pipelines of data that we are actually connecting into and making active, connecting into your Sage environment. So if I look, for example, at my customers pipeline, and this could be a group of tables, it could be one-to-one table extracts, or it could be a combination of multiple tables into a topic like customers. But in this case, if we look at this, it can be a multi-step extraction. For this one, we look at the initial source table, and you'll see that this is where, using just pointing and clicking, we can map what comes into what we would like it to be in the data model. And given that we have a data model built, we're really just mapping what's coming into that data model. So you'll see we have the incoming name with the label, the easy to business label, plus the technical column label, and then what we intend that to be on the way out. And it's data type being text, and whether or not it's a primary key, etc., etc. And we can set all of these up through using this point and click. And being a low-code development environment, our application will go away and write these extractions for you based on these definitions. And insofar as we refresh the schema, that means then that we're bringing in new tables, but we're also bringing in new columns, and we won't necessarily bring in every single column every time. So if I have a look at my columns here, you'll see the ones that I have selected to come through and the ones that we are ignoring. If you choose to have or want to select some of these columns and say, look, we actually do use that column, then it's just a matter of ticking the box. This will also pick up if you've added new columns to some of your custom tables. This will pick those up if they change, and we'll be able to include them simply by clicking and adding them to this pipeline. Likewise, you can also create new columns. So you'll notice here that if I have a look at, for example, one of these columns down here, you can see it doesn't have an input. And the reason for that is because we're doing a calculation. So if I open up my properties, you'll see here that the calculation to create that is an SQL expression, and we're fetching and looking up the field called customer since. and we're using that through an SQL expression. Now, a bit like using formulas within Excel, where you choose the formula, it gives you the template layout, and you fill in, which cells you'd like to include in that formula. We're doing the same for you here, being low-code environment, where we have templates for complex if statements, for simple if statements, for doing random numbers, aggregations, some analytical functions, all of the things that we find predominantly people use the most. We have templatized those, and you can now just drop one of these in and drag some columns in, for example, from over in our environment, and drag those in to build out what the definition of this column will be. So both including new data and new tables into the system is very easy, as I showed, adding the refresh schema, but also adding new columns into these tables and creating brand new calculations, or even lookups where you can look up into another table. That's very easy to do using this point and click environment, which then goes out and writes the extractions for you. Okay, let me close that up. Additionally, I think one of the questions I get asked quite often is, if I look at my model again, is how often can I refresh some of this data? And if I come in and have a look at my refresh schedules, and you'll notice I can get quite specific about what I'm doing here. So I can either do a refresh every day or every night of the entire data model, or I can choose which of those pipelines I would like to run at a different schedule. So I might have things running at different times of the day. And a good example of this might be at the end of the month, when you're closing off the books, if you've still got journals being posted, you might create one of these configurations for your GL table that says, run this, for example, instead of it being daily, I might choose to run this at an interval of, I don't know, every 2 minutes. And I will only want that to run maybe between midnight and 9 a.m. or whatever period I choose to have that. So I just for my GL and just for my journals, and I can get quite specific on the filtering, I just want that to run every 2 minutes. But everything else I can set different schedules for, and I may choose to have staggered depending on the company databases, or regional. I might have different countries. I might need to stagger those updates, and I can set different schedules for different pieces of our data model to run. I mean, that's a very easy thing to do as well. So that's a very quick overview of the model. I think one of the questions was, how easy is it to build a report? What you'll see though is, from a model, and one of the benefits of the model is, by virtue of that semantic layer that we're bringing through, we have business language over here rather than that typical technical 6-letter acronym for a table that we can use as report designers. So in our dimension tree over here on the left, you'll see for our model, we've got measures, which are essentially those things that we want to count, the dollars and the amounts that we want to count. And underneath that is our dimension, or our list of dimensions, which are the things that we would like to measure those things by. So whether it's by customer, by company, by date, these are all of our dimensions. And you'll see here, we've built a significant list of that. It goes over several pages, whether it's through product, whether it's through customer, sales region, etc. We've built all of this for you, and those are ready for you just simply to drag onto the report. So we'll start building a report, and I'll go into my measures, and I'll have a look at my sales, and I'll grab my cost amount and put that in my column. Now what you'll notice, if I could collapse my measures, is now this list of dimensions is significantly smaller. And the reason for that is, given that we understand both the incoming data model plus the model that we're storing the data in, we can identify or create this list of things that make sense to combine with cost amount, and get rid of or hide those that don't. In other words, making the job of a report designer a lot easier to get rid of the clutter of data elements they may never use or should not use with that cost amount. So we're leaving it really clear and easy for them to navigate through what may or may not make sense. So to continue on with this, I might want to include some time or date dimension. And we support multiple calendars. You can do calendar, you can do fiscal calendar. You can customize that to start on any day of the week, any day of the month. If you have fiscal calendars on a weekly basis, you can choose the weekly fiscal reporting with 544 if you choose, or in any other format. And you can choose on different reports to use different calendars if you wish. So in this example, I'm going to use the fiscal, and it's defined as year, quarter, month, and day. And I'd like to use the month for that. And I will drop that onto what we call our slices. And why I do that is it essentially says now I can have a bit of a dynamic list up here to choose from. And I'll just tell the system that I would like that slicer to be time. And we'll set that one to, well, let's make it a bit more current. Let's leave it there. Okay, so now what that means by setting that to time is I can now start looking at some of the full-featured time functionality that we have. And like Chris, I've been doing this for a very long time, and the projects that I've been involved in, the time dimension is usually one of the most difficult to deal with. And even doing simple things like show me this cost amount for this month against last year can get quite difficult. And we've invested significant time and effort into building out our time capabilities. And an example of that would be here. I can now look at current period, I can look at full period, I can do period to date, all those things, and all in a relative time format. So I'm going to look at current period, and I'm going to say, I'm going to take the context period. And the reason I'm doing that is because it means now if I change this, then that date will change. So if I go to July, then this will change. And so now I can start saying, right, let's make this report a bit more interesting. Let's change this report to be just for 1 month. And here's a list of some of the functions you can use. As we've said, we've invested a lot in making this very easy to do. So we grab the periods too, and I might want this to be a report across, for example, 6 periods or 6 months. And just like that, I've got a 6-month rolling report. So if I move this now to August, then February dropped off, August stands, and this report will continue to update itself every month so that it remains a 6-month rolling report, and I don't have to maintain that any further. So if I look back at my report, let's make it a bit more interesting. Let's use some more of that time functionality. I can take that cost amount, and just by dragging it over, I can now say from time, I would like to have a look at the to-date totals from last year for that same month. And simply by clicking and dragging, I can now see a comparison of this year versus last year. And then very quickly, I can start to do some calculations, create some customizations here, and I might want to create, for example, a variance. And using my trusty expression builder, I will say that is going to be cost amount less last year. So this year versus last year. And now I have my variances. I could then extend that and say, let's take the variance and create another custom formula. Call this one the variance percentage and make that the percentage of cost amount. Okay, now we just need to fix up some formatting. So let's go into our table and let's just change that to a percentage. Okay, that looks good. Now what we can do is also do some traffic lighting. I can see some negatives and some high numbers, etc. So let's just have a look at some of the negatives. So let's add some conditional and say if it is in fact less than 0, then let's make it red with some white text. Okay, and let's also say anything above 90% is green. All right, so some basic traffic lighting. Great, so in a couple of clicks, we've got a report that's looking quite good. I might take variance out now, we probably don't need that. And now I might want to save this report away and put that onto a dashboard so that anyone who logs into, for example, the CFO dashboard will be able to see this report without having to do any of this back-end process. They can just see it on their dashboard every morning. But we'll probably want to make this a chart. So let's make a chart. Let's add a chart. And you'll see that the variance is clearly on a different scale. So it's not showing up. So we'll just fix that. I'll select my variance and go into design, add a new axis. It's a little bit ugly. Let's make this look a little bit neater. All right, so now we've got our variance sitting there, and we can now remove the table. And I can now save that away and add it, go and edit the dashboard, drop that onto the dashboard ready for everybody to use as they log in for the next time. And of course, without having to do any further work, I've got all of the inbuilt functionality of my reporting, plus things like drill through or drill down, and eventually drill through into the transactions that sit underneath this. So very easy, you know, we've made it as simple as we can, pointing and clicking, you know, keeping the list of data to work with at its simplest, and also using the business labels rather than the technical labels, just to make it more intuitive for new users coming in who maybe have not used the Sage environment before. All right, Georgia, I might leave it there to see if there are any questions.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. We do have a few questions here. I'll start with some shorter ones first. What companies use Zap?
We
I'll
have,
take that one.
okay,
go.
go ahead, Chris. Sure, go.
I think I always like to throw out the banner ones. So Aston Martin is sensibly my favorite, if I might. But there's also Regal Cinemas, big cinema chain in the US, if you're familiar. There are quite a few local ones. Sunny Queen Eggs comes to mind. But more generally, there are many multi-billion-dollar revenue companies. And the most topical one will probably be Smiths and Sons wig makers as your kids go out for Halloweening in the next 2 weeks.
Thank you. At what development stage is Zap?
Yeah, so another very good question. As a company, we have over 15 years of history in analytics. And so we started out as a consultancy firm way back when, and then we built out an analytics company. An analytics product. So what you're seeing now is actually our data management platform that builds in all of that expertise and extends it with data modeling capabilities. And so this product is actually 5 years old, and we've spent the last few years also building it out now so that it's a cloud product which takes away all the ops aspects and allows our customers to just focus on insights.
All right, next question. We have a lot of external systems, including a billing system that uses SQL. Can we connect them to Zap too?
I'll grab that one, Chris.
Yeah, for sure.
So if I look at the model, you'll see under data sources, we currently have our Sage ERP registered in there, but I also have the ability to add additional data to my environment. One of the strengths of the development on our platform is we've done a lot of work in our ability to integrate external data sources and to automate that process and make it very, very easy to do. And one of the ways that we've done that is we've built some connectors across multiple categories. And if I look from left to right, we're sort of seeing here applications that are sort of more cloud-based that use APIs to get to. And we have built full connectors, and in some cases, such as Dynamics and Sage, we've built full applications, pre-built applications, as you've seen. But if you have other data that is sitting in maybe any one of these applications, then we already have pre-built connectors to get the data from those and integrate it very, very quickly into your Sage data. For the on-premises versions of those, again, we have built all of those connectors, and for a lot of these, we have pre-built applications as well. And then for your typical databases, as mentioned for SQL, if you have maybe a timesheet system or a billing system or etc. sitting in a database somewhere that you've built or bought, then we can access that through the database connection itself. And then with some services work, or we can map that data back into the data model for you or with you, or even teach you, which we would prefer is to teach you how to do that. And then if the data lives in more text-based shared environments, and you may have access to a web-based API, REST APIs, etc., or using OData, then we have connectors for that where you can create your own custom connections to whichever data source you choose.
Thank you. And one last question. Do reports allow direct navigation to Sage transactions?
Yes, they do. So as we looked at with the, for example, if I look at these, this drill through on the report was in fact a drill through to the transactions that we have extracted, but also within a Sage environment, we can actually punch out and show the transaction within Sage as well. So from this sort of drill through, we could make these clickable to take you into that transaction within Sage.
All right, excellent. That's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. If you could please take a second to complete the survey, we would really appreciate your feedback. And thanks, Christopher and Trevor.
Thanks, everyone.
Do that.
Thanks for having us.